Hi, my name is Nate Story, PhD. I'm doing this for BackyardLiberty.com, and today we're going to take an IBC system, and turn it into an aquaponics system. Aquaponics is the combination of hydroponic growing and aquaculture, and it's something that we've been doing here for almost a decade now. And we do it commercially, but today we're going to show you how to build a really simple, small, easy to build hydroponic or aquaponic system out of an IBC, or intermediate bulk container. So this is an IBC here. It's an intermediate bulk container. These are used to ship fluids, typically all over the world, and you can find them anywhere where there's a lot of industrial activity. The nice things about these things is they're really easy to work with and they're really inexpensive, so you can get a hold of them pretty easily. They're really useful, and today we're going to cut this one down and we're going to turn it into an aquaponic system for a home or a hobby aquaponic grower. So to get started, we're going to take off these two bars at the very top, and usually it's a little hex head screw here. Alright, so once these bars are out, we're going to actually take the liner out of the frame and get ready to do our cutting and our cleaning on that. So once we've marked off what is going to be our grow bed, we can knock this thing over and take the liner out. Our liner is out, we're just going to want to make sure that the line we drew is good and continuous along the, for making a cut along the entire IBC here. Once we have a good line marked, we can go ahead and just cut along this entire line. We're going to take off the entire top of this IBC. So at this point, after the top comes off, we now have our two separate tanks. We've got what's going to be our aquaculture tank and what's going to be the top of our tank, our grow bed. So at this point, you want to go through and you want to clean out your tanks really carefully. So you want to wash your IBCs out really well, preferably with hot water and with soap. And you want to wash it until you're pretty certain there's no more residue left. If you're using an IBC that previously held an acid of some kind, then use baking soda or something like that, a base, to kind of neutralize it. Similarly, if it held something basic, then go ahead and use acid, vinegar, or something like that to try and clean it out. Usually there will be a label on your IBC that will tell you what was transported in it. Generally, you want to just go with food products. So if you can find an IBC that contained a food product, it's worth paying a couple bucks extra to make sure that you have something in it that's non-toxic. We've used all sorts of IBCs before, including ones that had lactic acid in it. You just want to make sure it's a natural product. It's not something that's going to kill your fish or your plants. Typically, you can go online and you can find out really quick how toxic something is. Once the liner has been cleaned out pretty well, it's time to cut your frame. And we're going to cut this frame right above this bottom bar right here. And we're going to use kind of this lower part of the frame to form our grow bed. We're going to cut this right above this first bar here on the bottom. I'll remind you to make sure you wear some protective glasses of some kind and hearing protection. To do this, we're going to use an angle grinder with a cutting with a cutting blade on it, basically. But you can use a Sawzall or a reciprocal saw. You can use a jigsaw. You can use any of the above tools. as long as you've got a good metal blade to go on it. Doesn't really matter what you use, just so long as you get the job done. So once you've cut through all of these bars, essentially you can separate the bottom from the top. Now this top is going to essentially form a frame to support the liner that we're going to use for our aquaculture tank. So this is basically going to be setting on the ground, and the liner is going to set in it. This top part is going to form the frame essentially for our growing bed, and it's going to rest on top of our fish tank. So we're going to use all the different parts of this IBC. Once we've cut the top off of the bottom of your IBC frame, we're going to go around and we're just going to kind of smooth these down with an angle grinder, just because they kind of have burrs on them that can cut people. And because this will be exposed, this will be sitting on top. People will be leaning against it and touching it. We just kind of want to make sure it's good and safe. So another thing that you can always do down the road is to get that foam pipe insulation and just run a strip of it kind of around the top of your frame to make sure that it's kind of padded and it's not going to hurt anyone. Now there are a few other configurations you can do with IBCs that can be kind of fun, and I'm a huge advocate of sump-based systems, so this is probably the step up down the road. Once you cut your teeth on this type of system, you might start thinking about a sump system. And in sump systems you can use this bottom portion, instead of being a plant grow bed, you can use it as a sump tank. So as a low point in the system, all of the water in the system will drain to your sump tank, and you'll be pumping it from your sump tank up to grow beds and to your fish tank, essentially splitting that water. And the nice thing about that kind of a configuration is that you essentially get to put your grow beds at whatever level you want. They can be right on level with your fish tanks, or they can be above them or below them. Just so long as they're above the sump tanks, everything seems to work. So liners are good and washed out. We're going to drop them back in this frame, and I'll show you what to do next. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off our cap, and we're going to mark on the pallet portion of our IBC frame where we need to cut it out and make room for some of our PVC fittings. So to do that, the first thing we're going to do is take off the lid. Flip it over, and then trace around the inside of this lid. Once that's done, we can cut out that portion of this portion of the pallet. Now when you're doing this, you can use the same angle grinder that you had. You can use a Sawzall, a jigsaw, anything like that. So we did most of our dirty work outside. That was the rinsing of the tanks, and the cleaning of the tanks, and of course all of the cutting work. So once we've done all of that, we brought it inside of our greenhouse to the place where we want to put the system for it to grow. So we're gonna, now that it's in place, we're gonna basically put it all together and plumb it all up. So the first thing we're gonna put in is our pump. And I'm using a ridiculously oversized pump today because it's what we've got on hand. For your system, you can use pumps that are quite a bit smaller. I recommend, this is an Eco Plus pump. The Eco Plus pumps are great. They last a long time. They're really inexpensive. And you can go with a 285 or a 396. Either of those pumps will work out pretty nicely for you. But we're going to take this pump and just set it in the bottom of our IBC here. Off of this pump, then we're going to run our first piece of poly pipe. Today I'm using 3/4 inch, and you know, you can use 3/4 inch, you can use 1 inch, you can use 1/2 inch. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you have on hand and whatever is easiest. The smaller, of course, you go, the more limited your flow rates. But you know, it really just, the type of tubing that you use will depend on your budget and what you have available. I'm using 3/4 inch because it's really available. I've got this spool of it already, and it's about the right size for this particular tank. Now, with my pump and with this tubing, I'd be able to build a much larger system than this. So if I want to use this fish tank and stock it a little more heavily, I could essentially put in 2 or 3 or even 4 grow beds perhaps. And that might be something you consider. This particular system will just have 1, but you can plumb multiples onto this size of a fish tank and you should have no problem. So I do recommend you use a pipe cutter, a pipe cutting tool of some type to do the cuts. You can just use a knife if that's what you have handy, but just be really careful because it's really easy to cut yourself with this stuff. So we want to make sure that's on there firmly, and then we're going to go get a heat gun to put on our L's. So when you're putting on fittings like this, a lot of the time you can shove them on, they'll stay pretty well. The one concern is that if the weather really warms up and that plastic softens, that it will pop off under high pressure or for whatever reason. So I like to take a heat gun, or you can use a blow dryer if you have one, and just kind of heat the plastic up so it'll take that barbed fitting a little bit better. So we just basically put in a length of pipe there right to the top of our IBC, and then our L goes in, so it'll go right over the edge of our IBC, just like that. So next we're going to take 2 chunks of 2x4 that are about 48 inches long, and we're going to basically set this IBC right on top of them. And these are going to kind of help support the base of our grow bed. So once we have the frame for our grow bed about where we want it, set on top of these 2x4s, we're going to finish kind of plumbing our L out and up, and then we're going to put in our upper liner. You can put it in place and kind of test it just to make sure that you're in the right spot. Essentially, the top of this ring that your lid goes on should be pretty open in there, and that will just allow us to get our 2-inch fittings through our lid and down into our grow tank, or into our fish tank the way we want them. So here we have our lid to the top of our IBC, or what's going to be our grow bed, and we have our 2-inch fittings. 1 threaded female, 1 threaded male. And these fittings are essentially going to fit through this lid between the grow bed and the fish tank beneath it. So to do this, you're going to need a hole saw. And I've got a 2 3/8 inch hole saw, which should be just about perfect to fit this threaded male fitting through the hole. If you most folks only got about a 2 1/4 inch hole saw. If you have one on hand, that'll work just fine as well. You're just going to want to kind of heat up the hole in the lid with your heat gun before you start threading that male fitting through. So to get started here, I'm just going to drill a hole right in the middle of our lid with my 2 3/8 inch hole saw. Once your hole is drilled in the top of your lid, you're just going to basically take your male fitting and you're going to slide it through, and it should fit pretty cleanly through that hole saw, and wrap it around the male fitting here. So it'll slide on nice and easy. You can glue it if you want to. I recommend using Teflon tape. It always allows you to take things apart later on. Plumber's putty is the same way, it's just a little more messy than Teflon tape. But this stuff basically just, you know, it just gives you a little bit of, it reduces the friction between the two fittings. So we're just going to screw these on. And at this point you may need to go get some channel locks or something to help tighten these two down so that they kind of sandwich that plastic between them. Again, this doesn't have to be a perfect seal. Let's see. It doesn't have to be a perfect seal, it just has to be something that's going to hold your standpipe in place. So once you have your PVC fittings in there, it took us a little bit of grunt work to get those screwed in. If you're having a hard time, if it's pretty tough, you can always take a piece of plywood or just about anything and put it on the outside of your lid and use it as a spacer so you don't have to thread as much fitting together. But again, it doesn't matter that it's really tight. Doesn't hurt if it is, but it won't really matter because we're basically just going to friction fit our pipe into the top and into the bottom of here. And if it leaks, that's not a bad thing either, because we're going to have holes drilled all through this pipe so it can leak. So now we just got to put this on the top of our grow bed, and we'll be ready to get started on the plumbing. Once it's through, the bottom part of that 2-inch fitting should fit neatly through the bottom of the pallet. We should have cut the hole so that it fits cleanly through there. We've got plenty of room to work on it both up here and down there. So at this point we've cut our standpipe. This is going to be the pipe that the water drains into to drain down into our fish tank down here. Now this is going to be really just a glorified drain. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to drill some holes in it, or a lot of people, if they've got a table saw, they'll take it and they'll score this pipe so that the water can drain in really easily. We don't have a table saw handy, so we're just going to use a drill to drill some holes. Now the nice thing is we're just going to friction fit this in here. So we can always take it out and change it later if we want. Also, another thing is we want the height of this to be right below the height of the lip of our grow bed. And the reason for that is if for some reason this clogs up, this drain clogs up, the water level will rise and it will just be able to flow through the top of this directly down into the fish tank instead of overflowing over the side of our grow bed. So that's the reason why we make it this height. So let's drill this, and while we're at it, we're going to take a piece of 4-inch PVC that's going to fit down in here, and we're going to drill some holes in that too. And that's essentially just going to form a barrier between the media and the standpipe here. It's going to reduce the amount of roots that grow into this, and it's going to reduce our clogging incidents as this thing operates. It's going to make our lives way easier. So we're going to take our drain pipe here, and we're going to drill some holes. Now the number of holes and the size of holes that you drill will depend on what kind of production you're going to be doing. If you're going to be doing ebb and flow, that is, your pump's going to be on a timer, you're going to be pumping water up and filling your grow bed, and then your pump will turn off and that water will slowly drain. You want to do a couple, fewer holes right at the beginning, and you want to watch your grow bed and then drill more holes or drill the holes larger to get the desired drain rate. So you don't want it to stay too full of water. At the same time, you don't want it to drain out immediately. You want it to, essentially keep the upper level of that media nice and moist. we're going to be doing constant flow. That is, the pump will always be on. It's not going to be on a timer. So we're going to just drill quite a few smaller holes here initially, and then down the road, if we want to increase the drain rate, we can, of course, just drill the holes out a little bit larger. So here I've drilled my holes, and I've drilled a couple sets of smaller ones and a couple sets of larger ones. Something I'm pretty sure is going to give me about the drain rate I want. I can always go through and drill out these smaller holes and make them a little bit bigger over time as I need to. So essentially at this point my drain pipe is ready to go. We can put our drain pipe in and we'll be ready to go on that front. So here I'm just marking off a 9-inch basically the pipe that's going to go around our drain pipe to protect it from getting clogged with plant roots and gravel, and I'm going to cut this off here pretty soon. So this is the pipe that's going to go around my drain pipe. And again, we can do this several ways. A lot of people like to take a table saw and just score this, you know, in sections the whole way around to allow it to drain. And that actually works the best, but again, I don't have a table saw with me here today, so I'm just going to drill it. Now, you want to make sure you're using holes, if you are going to drill it, that are smaller than the media you're going to be using, because if they're larger, your media is just going to tumble right through those holes. So we're going to be using 3/4 inch crushed granite. So the largest size I'll probably do is actually the largest regular bit I've got here at 3/8, and I'm just going to drill a mess of holes in this thing so it drains really nicely. So now that we've got our this drilled, this covering to go around our drain pipe, it just basically fits right over it like that. And once we fill this up with gravel, it's going to fill up to here, and the water's going to be able to flow through, and we're going to minimize the amount of roots that get down here and clog up our drain pipe. Now we're going to have to pull this from time to time and just clean it out and make sure that there isn't anything in there, but by and large this will keep us fairly safe. This is just 4-inch septic PVC pipe. It's really cheap. Usually you've got a couple scraps of it lying around. If you don't have some scraps of this, then you can use 6-inch PVC, basically anything that will 4-inch and up that will fit around this, that you can either score with a table saw or drill some holes in to allow water to kind of drain through, filter through it. 6-inch, 4-inch, any of that will work. Alright, so now we know where our bed is going to go. We can put our final L fitting on, and that's basically just going to make sure that our water is going into our grow bed. So we're going to do this, then we're going to fill it up with gravel, and then we're going to finish the irrigation plumbing on the top of this system. Alright, so now that we've got everything else put together, the final thing to do here before we do the rest of our plumbing is to shovel this rock into here. We're going to fill up our grow bed with 3/4 inch crushed granite, and then we're going to finish our plumbing and start to rinse our rock. Alright, once your growing bed is filled in with 3/4 inch crushed granite, or hydroton, or expanded shale, whatever media you plan on using, it's time to put the irrigation pipes on top of your gravel. Now these are the pipes that are going to spray water down into your media, and it's going to basically, you know, irrigate the top of this bed. So it's time to cut those pipes. Our bed is about 45 inches wide, so just to be safe, we're going to cut those at about 42 inches long, 2 of them, and we're going to cut 2 at about 35 inches long. So we'll go do that right now. So now it's time to hook up our feed line, our irrigation line, to our grow bed. In this case, we're going to do that with a 3/4 inch to 1 inch male threaded fitting and a T. So this is just a PVC T, and it's got a slip on both sides, and then is threaded female on the inside there. So we're basically going to put these two together and use this to hook up our irrigation tubing here. So give this a shot. To get started, go ahead and use Teflon tape again. You never know when you're going to want to take this apart in the future. Not have to be very tight. They can be just basically hand tight. And if you really want to take a pair of channel locks or something like that and tighten them on, further, you can do that if you want. But essentially now we're ready to go with our 3/4 inch feed line here. So we're going to take now our PVC, our 35-inch PVC piece, and we're going to cut it in half. And Paul actually took an extra inch or so off each of these pieces so that we've got room for our T fitting here. Now, just the first time around, we're just going to fit these hand tight. We're not going to glue them. And that's because if it leaks, it doesn't really matter. These can afford to leak. Because they're in the grow bed now. So once they're here, we're just going to take now our L's and we're going to fit together kind of a circular irrigation tubing here. So once you've got your pieces cut and fitted using your L's, just hand tight, you just want to basically make sure it fits your grow bed. You may have to take an inch off here or an inch off there to make it all fit. But once it fits, you're pretty much good to go. At this point, we just want to drill our holes for our irrigation solution, and then we'll basically put it right back together again, fill her up, and turn her on. So once you have your irrigation wand in, kind of around the perimeter of your grow bed, you're basically at this point ready to rinse this media off. So the media, when you get it, it's going to be really dirty or dusty, and there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it the labor-intensive way on the front end and the easy way on the back end, and that's just basically rinsing it all right now with a hose. You're going to open up the gate valve down in your IBC, and as the water gets rinsed and drains down in there, you're basically just going to be able to flush out all that dirty water. Or if you plan on taking a while to cycle your system anyways, you can basically just run it, elevate your pump in your lower tank, and let all the sediment settle out in your fish tank. And that's probably the technique we're going to do right now. Either one is fine. It just depends on how much time you want to spend on it and how labor intensive you want to get. Because we don't plan on actually, because we're going to cycle this for a while before we use it, letting the sediment settle out isn't a big deal for us. It makes it a little bit easier to rinse off this granite. So once the system has been filled up, you're going to want to cycle it before you put fish in. And cycling is a term that's just basically used to describe getting the bacteria growing and active on your media. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. One of the easiest, simplest, most common ways to do it is called fishless cycling. And in fishless cycling, instead of using fish, you just use ammonia. Some people use urine, some people use a lot of different things where they'll throw a dead fish in the tank. I'm a big fan of just using household ammonia, so just buying ammonia at the store and putting a very small amount to start. The reason that's nice is because you're not introducing pathogens to your system like you would with, say, a dead fish. So basically it usually takes around 6 weeks to get your bacteria going on your substrate. You can speed it up sometimes if you can find substrate from someone else. So if you can find media that someone else has been using and it's biologically active, you can speed up the cycling time. But it's important that you speed up, that you cycle before you put fish in, or your fish will die. They'll poison themselves with ammonia. So you need to buy a test kit. This is just a test kit that you can get at any pet store, and it will test for ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates. And you want to start testing daily for ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate from the time you start cycling. And what you'll see is you'll see ammonia. You want to add ammonia until it hits about 3 or 4 parts per million. Over time, over the following weeks, you'll see that ammonia kind of drop down. You'll keep adding ammonia, but what you'll start to see is you'll start to see nitrites begin to show up. Once your nitrites begin showing up, it tells you that your bacteria are getting established. You want to keep what you're doing, and eventually what you'll see is nitrates begin to show up in the system. And this basically means that your system has reached the final stage of colonization. And very soon you're going to have essentially a really healthy system biology. At that point you can continue adding ammonia in very small quantities, or you can just basically wait until all of the ammonia is converted to nitrates. At that point you can start adding fish very slowly. The important thing is not to overfeed initially, to make sure that you're feeding at very low rates. Remember, fish don't need as much food as mammals do, or warm-blooded animals, so you can get away with feeding them a lot less. And just take it really slow initially, and take your time. And if you have any questions, read the book. And there's information on. If you have any questions, read the book, because there's information in there on cycling as well. So this is inside my aquaponic greenhouse here. We don't use horizontal techniques as much. We use mostly vertical ones that I designed. I've got vertical production towers here that I've got some patents on. And we use them to get a little bit more out of our space. Once you've built your IBC system and you're ready to scale up and try something that's a little more space efficient, you can try tower production, and usually you can get about 2 to 3 times more production out of your space. So this tower here, we're growing lettuce in. You can see it grows fairly well. This one's normally about 3 or 4 towers back in the mass. So even though it's a little bit shaded, it still grows pretty nicely, and we get good production here. I started into aquaponics as part of my research at University of Wyoming, and just kind of grew into it. I was interested in fish farming initially and just wanted to figure out what to do with all that fish waste that was useful, and eventually I found myself more of a farmer than a fish production guy. So this is where we're at today. We're growing a lot of vegetables in hydroponic towers.